The iron horse pulled into Clifton, Arizona territory, with a screech and a hiss that sent plumes of white steam billowing across the dusty platform. And Kellen Garrett knew the moment he laid eyes on the slender woman stepping down from the passenger car that his entire world had just changed forever. He had not meant to be at the train station at all. His horse had thrown a shoe just outside town, and he had walked the animal to the blacksmith near the depot. But there he stood, holding his gelding's reins, watching as Josephine Zimmerman placed one dainty boot on the wooden platform, her traveling dress the color of autumn wheat, her dark hair pinned beneath a modest bonnet. She clutched a worn carpetbag in one hand and shielded her eyes from the harsh afternoon sun with the other, scanning the sparse crowd with an expression that mingled hope and trepidation. Kellen could not move, could not breathe. It was as though someone had lassoed his heart and pulled tight. The woman was beautiful, yes, with delicate features and lips that curved just slightly even when she was not smiling. But it was something more than beauty that arrested him. Something in the way she held herself, the quiet dignity in her posture, despite the uncertainty in her eyes. She was looking for someone, that much was clear. And then Kellen saw him. Marcus Hendricks, the owner of the mercantile, a man 15 years Kellen's senior with a paunch belly and a calculating gaze. Marcus was pushing through the small crowd, his face arranged in what he probably thought was a welcoming expression, but looked more like a cat eyeing a cornered mouse. Kellen's stomach turned to stone. He had heard the talk in the saloon 2 weeks prior. Marcus had been crowing about it to anyone who would listen. A mail-order bride, he had said, coming all the way from Philadelphia. A respectable woman who would bring him children and keep his house and not ask too many questions about where his money came from. Everyone in Clifton knew Marcus Hendricks was not a good man. He cheated his customers when he could get away with it, watered down the goods he sold, and there were whispers about how he had acquired the mercantile in the first place. The previous owner had signed it over and left town in the middle of the night, and no one had heard from him since. Josephine Zimmerman extended her hand as Marcus approached, and Kellen watched her face carefully. There was no recognition in her expression, only the polite wariness of a woman meeting a stranger who was supposed to become her husband. Kellen's hands tightened on the reins. His gelding snorted and tossed its head. What business was it of his? The woman had made an arrangement. She had traveled all this way to marry Marcus Hendricks. It was not Kellen's place to interfere, but his feet were already moving. He crossed the platform in long strides, leading his horse behind him. Marcus had taken Josephine's bag and was saying something Kellen could not quite hear. The woman's expression had shifted slightly, a small line appearing between her brows. "Excuse me," Kellen said, his voice rougher than he intended. They both turned. Marcus's eyes narrowed with immediate irritation. Josephine looked at Kellen with those remarkable eyes, green as spring grass after a rain, and he felt that tug on his heart again, even stronger this time. "Garrett," Marcus said flatly, "this does not concern you." "I am Kellen Garrett," Kellen said, addressing Josephine directly and ignoring Marcus entirely. "I work the K-Bar-G ranch just outside town. My father owns it." He did not know what else to say. He had not thought this through. "Miss Zimmerman is my intended bride," Marcus said, his voice taking on a hard edge. "She is here to marry me. Now if you will excuse us." "Mrs. Patterson asked me to fetch you both to her boarding house," Kellen lied smoothly, surprising himself. "She said the lady would need a place to stay until the arrangements are made proper." This was partly true, at least in spirit. Mrs. Patterson ran the only respectable boarding house in Clifton, and she had very firm opinions about propriety. She would indeed insist that an unmarried woman could not stay under Marcus Hendricks's roof. Marcus's face reddened. "I have made arrangements." "Have you spoken with Mrs. Patterson about them?" Kellen asked mildly. The silence that followed was answer enough. Marcus had clearly assumed he could simply install his mail-order bride in his house without regard for what the town's respectable citizens might think. Josephine cleared her throat softly. Both men looked at her. "I confess I am quite fatigued from my journey," she said. Her voice was low and musical, with the refined accent of the East Coast. "If there is a boarding house, I would be most grateful for a night's rest before we proceed with any formalities, Mr. Hendricks." It was diplomatically said, but Kellen caught the relief in her eyes. Whatever first impression Marcus had made, it had not been a favorable one. Marcus's jaw worked. He could hardly argue without seeming unreasonable. "Of course," he said tersely. "I shall call on you tomorrow morning, Miss Zimmerman." "Thank you, Mr. Hendricks." Marcus thrust her carpetbag at Kellen with more force than necessary and stalked off toward the mercantile without another word. Josephine watched him go, and Kellen saw her shoulders sag almost imperceptibly. "Thank you," she said quietly, turning back to Kellen. "I hope I have not caused you any trouble." "No trouble at all," Kellen said. "Mrs. Patterson's boarding house is just up the street. I will walk you there." They fell into step together, Kellen leading his horse with one hand and carrying her bag with the other. The afternoon sun beat down on the dusty main street of Clifton. The town was small but bustling, grown up around the copper mines that dotted the surrounding hills. Miners, cowboys, merchants, and the occasional Apache from the nearby reservation all mingled in the streets. "It is very different from Philadelphia," Josephine observed. "I imagine it is. What made you decide to come all this way?" She was quiet for a moment, and Kellen worried he had overstepped. But then she spoke, her voice carefully neutral. "My father passed away 6 months ago. He left debts I could not pay. I was living with my aunt and uncle, but they have 5 children of their own and little room for another mouth to feed. When I saw Mr. Hendricks's advertisement, it seemed like Providence, a fresh start in a new place. I am sorry about your father. Thank you." She paused, then added, "He was a good man, a teacher. He simply was never very practical about money matters." They had reached the boarding house, a 2-story structure with a wide porch and lace curtains in the windows. Mrs. Patterson herself appeared in the doorway before they could knock, as though she had been watching for them. She was a formidable woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue when the situation called for it. "Well now," she said, looking between Kellen and Josephine with open curiosity. "And who might this be, Mrs. Patterson?" "This is Miss Josephine Zimmerman. She has just arrived on the train from Philadelphia. I thought you might have a room available for her." "Philadelphia, Mrs." Patterson's expression softened immediately. "You poor dear, that is quite a journey. Of course I have a room. Come in, come in." She ushered Josephine inside with motherly efficiency, then paused and looked back at Kellen. "Thank you for bringing her, Mr. Garrett. That was kind of you." There was a knowing look in her eyes that made Kellen shift his weight uncomfortably. Mrs. Patterson saw far too much. "I will call on you tomorrow if I may," Kellen said to Josephine, "to see that you are settling in well." "That would be very kind," Josephine said. Their eyes met and held for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then Mrs. Patterson was pulling her inside and the door was closing, and Kellen was left standing on the porch with his horse and a feeling in his chest like nothing he had ever experienced before. He was in trouble. Deep trouble. The woman was meant for another man, had traveled across the country to marry him, and Kellen had absolutely no right to interfere. But as he led his horse down the street toward the blacksmith, he knew with complete certainty that he was going to do exactly that. By the time Kellen returned home to the K-Bar-G ranch, the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and red across the desert sky. The ranch house was a sprawling adobe structure his grandfather had built 30 years ago, when the territory was even wilder than it was now. His father, Kenneth Garrett, was sitting on the front porch, smoking his pipe and watching the last of the ranch hands drive the horses into the corral for the night. "You are late," Kenneth observed as Kellen dismounted. "Trouble in town?" "No, sir. Horse threw a shoe, had to see the blacksmith." Kenneth puffed on his pipe, his weathered face unreadable. That should not have taken all afternoon. Kellen knew better than to lie outright to his father. Kenneth Garrett had an uncanny ability to detect dishonesty. "The train came in while I was there. Marcus Hendricks's mail-order bride arrived." "Ah," Kenneth's expression darkened slightly. "Poor woman. Does she know what she is getting into?" "I do not think so." "Not your concern, son." "No, sir." But Kenneth was watching him now with those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "You helped her, did you not?" "I made sure she got to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house instead of going straight to Hendricks's place." Kenneth was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "This woman, what is she like?" Kellen hesitated. How could he possibly put into words what he had felt on that train platform? "She seems kind, educated. She has had some hardship, I think, but she carries herself with grace. And you are interested in her." It was not a question. Kellen met his father's gaze. "Yes. She came here to marry another man, I know. Marcus Hendricks will not take kindly to interference." "I know that too." Kenneth took the pipe from his mouth and studied his son. "Your mother would say I should discourage you, tell you to leave well enough alone. But you are not going to do that." A slow smile crossed Kenneth's face. "Your mother would also say that when a Garrett man knows what he wants, there is no point trying to talk him out of it. I knew I would marry her the moment I saw her at a church social in Tucson. She was there visiting her cousin and was supposed to return to California the next week. I convinced her to stay." "How?" "I was honest. I told her what I felt. I told her what kind of life I could offer her, and I gave her the choice. That is important, son. Whatever you do, you make sure this woman has a real choice, not pressure, not obligation, a genuine choice." Kellen nodded slowly. "Thank you, sir." "Do not thank me yet. You may be starting a war with Marcus Hendricks." "Then so be it." The next morning, Kellen rose before dawn and completed his chores with unusual efficiency. He mucked out stalls, checked the fence lines in the near pasture, and helped two of the ranch hands move a herd of cattle to fresh grazing. By mid-morning, he had washed up and changed into his best shirt and vest, and was riding back into Clifton. His heart was pounding as he tied his horse in front of Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. He felt like a green kid calling on a girl for the first time, not a 24-year-old man who had been running cattle since he was tall enough to sit a horse. Mrs. Patterson answered his knock with a knowing smile. "Good morning, Mr. Garrett. I wondered if we might see you today." "Is Miss Zimmerman available?" "She is taking breakfast in the dining room." "Go on through." The dining room was small and cheerful, with sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of fresh coffee and biscuits in the air. Josephine sat at the table alone, a cup of tea before her, and a barely touched plate of eggs and toast. She wore a simple gray dress that somehow made her eyes look even greener. She looked up as he entered, and her face brightened in a way that made his pulse race. "Mr. Garrett, good morning." "Good morning, Miss Zimmerman. I hope I am not intruding." "Not at all. Please join me." She gestured to the chair across from her. He sat, suddenly aware that he had not thought about what to say beyond the pleasantries. Mrs. Patterson appeared with a cup of coffee for him and disappeared again with remarkable discretion. "How did you find your first night in Clifton?" Kellen asked. "Restful. Mrs. Patterson has been very kind." Josephine paused, turning her teacup in her hands. Mr. Garrett, I want to thank you again for yesterday. I am not certain what you intervened in exactly, but I am grateful nonetheless. You are not certain, she met his eyes. I am not naive, Mr. Garrett. Mr. Hendricks was not pleased to be contradicted. I gather he expected me to simply go along with whatever arrangements he had made without question. And you are not the type to do that. A small smile crossed her lips. My father raised me to think for myself. Sometimes I wonder if that is a liability rather than an asset. It is an asset, Kellen said firmly. Any man who wants a woman who cannot think for herself is a fool. That is a rather unconventional opinion. I suppose it is. They looked at each other across the table, and Kellen felt that pull again, that certainty that this woman was meant to be in his life. Before he could find the words to say anything more, there was a commotion at the front door. Mrs. Patterson's voice rose in protest, and then Marcus Hendricks was standing in the doorway of the dining room, his face red and his eyes hard. Miss Zimmerman, he said tersely, I have come to take you to see the house. We have arrangements to discuss. Josephine set down her teacup with careful precision. Mr. Hendricks, I was not expecting you quite so early. The minister is available this afternoon. I see no reason to delay. Kellen saw Josephine's eyes widen slightly. This afternoon, Mr. Hendricks, I have only just arrived. Surely we should take some time to become acquainted before we proceed to marriage. We can become acquainted as man and wife. You came here to marry me, did you not? There was an edge to his voice that Kellen did not like at all. He stood, placing himself subtly between Marcus and Josephine. The lady said she needs time, Kellen said quietly. Marcus's eyes narrowed to slits. This is none of your concern, Garrett. Miss Zimmerman and I have an agreement. An agreement should be honored by both parties, Josephine said, standing as well. Her voice was calm, but Kellen could hear the steel beneath it. I agreed to travel here to meet you with the possibility of marriage, Mr. Hendricks. I did not agree to be rushed to the altar before I have even seen the town in daylight. You are being unreasonable. I am being cautious. Surely you can understand that. Marcus's hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment, Kellen thought the man might actually try to grab Josephine, and he shifted his weight, ready to intervene. But Marcus seemed to catch himself. He straightened his vest with sharp, angry movements. Very well. I will give you until tomorrow. But I have invested considerable money in bringing you here, Miss Zimmerman. I expect a return on that investment. The words hung in the air like a slap. Josephine's face went pale, then flushed with anger. I am not livestock to be purchased, Mr. Hendricks. You took my money for the train ticket. You agreed to this arrangement. I agreed to the possibility of marriage if we suited each other, nothing more. We will suit each other just fine once you learn your place. Kellen moved then, stepping fully between them. I think you should leave now, Hendricks. Or what? You will throw me out in front of the lady if I have to. The two men stared at each other. Marcus was older but had gone soft around the middle. Kellen worked cattle and horses every day and was lean and hard. They both knew how a physical confrontation would end. Marcus stepped back. Tomorrow, he said to Josephine, I will be back tomorrow and you will make your decision. He turned on his heel and strode out. They heard the front door slam. Josephine sank back into her chair. Her hands were trembling slightly as she picked up her teacup. I have made a terrible mistake, she said quietly. Kellen sat down across from her again. You could not have known. I should have asked more questions. Done more research. I was so desperate to leave Philadelphia to escape my circumstances that I did not think clearly. What will you do? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her tea. Then she looked up at him, and there was determination in her green eyes. I do not know yet. But I will not be bullied into marriage. I will not trade one form of desperation for another." "Good," Kellen said. Then, because he could not seem to help himself, he added, "You have options, Miss Zimmerman. You are not without friends here, even though you only just arrived." "Am I to count you as a friend, Mr. Garrett? If you will have me as one, yes." Something shifted in her expression, a softening around her eyes. "I would like that very much." Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. "That dreadful man! I am so sorry, dear." "I tried to stop him, but he just pushed past me." "It is not your fault, Mrs. Patterson," Josephine assured her, "and he is gone now." "Will you marry him?" Mrs. Patterson asked bluntly. "I do not think so. I do not think we would suit each other at all. Thank the Lord for small mercies." "That man has a mean streak a mile wide." Mrs. Patterson turned to Kellen. "What are you still sitting there for? Take the girl out and show her the town properly. She should see what Clifton has to offer before she makes any decisions." Kellen blinked. "I would not want to presume." "You are not presuming if I am suggesting it," Mrs. Patterson said tartly. Then she looked at Josephine. "Unless you would rather stay here and worry about tomorrow," Josephine smiled, the first genuine smile Kellen had seen from her. It transformed her face, made her eyes light up. "I think I would very much like to see the town, if Mr. Garrett does not mind playing tour guide." "It would be my pleasure," Kellen said, rising to his feet. Josephine fetched her bonnet and a light shawl, and soon they were walking down the main street of Clifton together. The morning was warming up, but it was not yet the scorching heat of midday. Kellen found himself acutely aware of Josephine walking beside him, the rustle of her skirts, the way she tilted her head to look at things that caught her interest. "It is smaller than I expected," she observed, "but charming in its own way." "Clifton is a mining town mostly," Kellen explained. "Copper. The mines bring in workers from all over. Mexicans, Chinese, Irish, Italians. Makes for an interesting mix. And you are a rancher. My family is. The K-Bar-G has been here for 3 generations. We run cattle mostly, some horses. It is a good life." "You sound like you love it." "I do. I cannot imagine living anywhere else or doing anything else." They passed the mercantile, and Kellen deliberately steered Josephine to the other side of the street. He pointed out the assay office, the saloon, the small church with its white painted steeple. They walked to the edge of town where you could see the desert stretching out toward the mountains, the landscape all ochre and sage green under the brilliant blue sky. "It is beautiful in a stark way," Josephine said softly. "So different from the East. Everything there is green and crowded. Here there is so much space, so much sky." "Does it frighten you?" She considered this. "A little, but it is also exhilarating, like anything could happen." They stood there for a moment, looking out at the vast expanse of land. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. "May I ask you something personal, Miss Zimmerman?" Kellen said. "Josephine, please, and yes. What did you hope to find when you came here?" "Not with Marcus Hendricks specifically, but in general. What were you looking for?" She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "A place to belong, I suppose. In Philadelphia, after my father died, I was just a burden, a problem to be solved. I thought perhaps out here I could be useful, necessary, maybe even valued. You are all of those things already." She turned to look at him, surprise in her eyes. "You barely know me." "I know enough." Their gazes held. Kellen felt the moment stretch between them, heavy with possibility. "Kellen," she said, and hearing his given name on her lips sent a thrill through him. "Why are you being so kind to me? You have no obligation, no reason to involve yourself in my situation." "Maybe I want to. But why?" He could have dissembled, could have made some excuse about basic human decency or neighborly hospitality. But his father's words came back to him. "Be honest. Give her a choice." "Because from the moment I saw you step off that train, I knew you were important," he said simply. I know how that sounds. I know we just met. But it is the truth. There was something about you, Josephine, something that made me certain that my life would not be the same after that moment. She stared at him, her lips parted in surprise. A faint blush colored her cheeks. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. I am not asking you for anything or expecting anything from you. I just wanted you to know that you have options, that you do not have to marry Marcus Hendricks if you do not want to, that there are people here who would help you find another path, people like you. Yes, like me. She looked away out at the desert again, but he could see that she was smiling slightly. I felt something too, she admitted quietly, on the platform yesterday. When you walked up and introduced yourself, I felt like I could breathe again, like maybe everything would be all right. Kellen's heart soared. He wanted to reach out and take her hand, pull her into his arms, but he restrained himself. Too much, too soon. It will be all right, he said instead. I promise you that. They walked back through town, talking more easily now. Josephine told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, about her father's love of books and learning, about the schools where he had taught. Kellen told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the satisfaction of working with animals and the land. They stopped at the small restaurant near the hotel, and Kellen bought Josephine lunch. It was nothing fancy, just stew and bread, but they sat by the window and talked for hours, until the afternoon sun slanted long across the street. When Kellen finally walked Josephine back to the boarding house, he felt like he had known her for years instead of just a day. Thank you for today, she said as they stood on Mrs. Patterson's porch. You have given me a great deal to think about. Think carefully about tomorrow, Kellen said, about what Marcus Hendricks expects and what you are willing to give. And remember that you always have a choice, no matter what he says. I will remember. She went inside and Kellen mounted his horse and rode back to the ranch. His head was full of Josephine, of the sound of her laugh when he had told her about the time his horse had dumped him in the water trough, of the way her eyes lit up when she talked about poetry and literature, of the curve of her neck and the small dimple that appeared in her left cheek when she smiled. He was in love with her, completely, utterly in love, and he had known her for less than 24 hours. His father was waiting on the porch again when Kellen arrived home. How did it go? Kenneth asked. She is not going to marry him, Kellen said. I am almost certain of it. And then what? I do not know yet, but I am going to marry her father. Somehow, someway, I am going to make Josephine Zimmerman my wife. Kenneth smiled around his pipe. Then I suppose I should prepare for a wedding. The next morning, Kellen was up even earlier than usual. He could not sleep, his mind churning with thoughts of what would happen when Marcus confronted Josephine again. He knew he should let her handle it herself, should trust her to make her own decision and stand by it. But he also knew Marcus Hendricks, knew the man's temper and his pride. He did not trust Marcus to accept rejection gracefully, so when his morning chores were done, Kellen rode back into Clifton and positioned himself across the street from the boarding house, waiting. He did not have to wait long. Marcus arrived at precisely 10 o'clock, dressed in his Sunday best and carrying a bouquet of flowers that looked like he had picked them from someone's garden. Kellen watched as the man knocked on the door and was admitted by Mrs. Patterson. Kellen dismounted and crossed the street. He did not go inside, but he positioned himself on the porch where he could hear raised voices through the open window. This is ridiculous. That was Marcus, his voice sharp with anger. You came here to marry me. I paid for your passage. You owe me this. I owe you nothing. Josephine's voice was calm but firm. I offered to repay you for the train ticket, Mr. Hendricks. I will work if I must, but I will send you every penny. I do not want your money, I want a wife. Then I suggest you place another advertisement. I am not the woman you need. You are exactly the woman I need. Educated, well-mannered, young enough to bear children. You will do perfectly. I am not a broodmare. You will be whatever I say you will be once we are married. There was a crash, as though someone had slammed something down on a table. Kellen's hand went to the door handle. I will not marry you, Josephine said, her voice rising now. I would rather scrub floors for the rest of my life than spend one day as your wife. You ungrateful little witch, I should drag you to the minister right now. You will do no such thing. Kellen opened the door and strode into the parlor. Marcus had Josephine backed into a corner, one hand raised as though he might strike her. Josephine stood her ground, her face pale but her chin raised defiantly. Mrs. Patterson was fluttering nearby, clearly torn between intervening and staying out of it. Step away from her, Kellen said, his voice deadly quiet. Marcus whirled around. I told you to stay out of this, Garrett. And I am telling you to step away from her. Now. She is my intended bride. She just told you she will not marry you. That makes her nothing to you, so step away. Marcus's face was purple with rage. This is your doing. You have been poisoning her against me. I have been telling her the truth about what kind of man you are. I should call you out for this. A duel. Kellen almost laughed. You want to duel me? Over a woman who does not want you. Go ahead, Hendricks. Name your terms. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. He was no fool, whatever else he was. He knew he would lose any physical confrontation with Kellen. This is not over, Marcus hissed. That woman owes me, and I will collect one way or another. The only thing she owes you is the price of a train ticket, and she has offered to pay that. Now get out. For a moment, Kellen thought Marcus might actually try to fight him. The older man's hands curled into fists and his whole body tensed. But then he seemed to deflate. He turned to Josephine one last time. You will regret this, he said. This town is not kind to women alone. You will come crawling back to me within a week, begging me to marry you. And when you do, I will make you grovel. Get out, Mrs. Patterson said sharply, finding her voice at last. Get out of my house right now, Marcus Hendricks, or I will fetch the sheriff. Marcus grabbed his hat and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. In the silence that followed, Josephine swayed slightly. Kellen moved quickly, catching her arm to steady her. Are you all right? He asked. Yes, I am fine, just a bit shaken. She looked up at him, and there were tears in her eyes, but she was also smiling. I did it. I actually stood up to him. You were magnificent, Kellen said. Mrs. Patterson bustled over with a chair. Sit down, dear. I will get you some tea or perhaps something stronger. Josephine sat, and Kellen knelt beside her chair, still holding her hand. She did not pull away. He was right about one thing, Josephine said quietly. I do not know how I will manage here on my own. I have no money, no prospects, no family. You have friends, Kellen said firmly, and you have skills. You are educated. You can read and write, probably better than half the people in this town. You can find work. As what? A saloon girl. Her voice was bitter. As a teacher, Mrs. Patterson said, returning with the tea. Clifton needs a proper teacher. We have been making do with whoever is willing to take on the job, but most of the miners and cowboys are not exactly scholarly types. An educated woman from the East. The town council would hire you in a heartbeat. Josephine looked up, hope dawning in her eyes. Do you really think so? I know so. My husband was on the town council before he passed. God rest his soul. I still have connections. Let me make some inquiries. I do not know what to say. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you so much. Do not thank me yet. We have to convince those old goats first. But I do not think it will be difficult. Mrs. Patterson smiled. Drink your tea, dear. Everything is going to work out just fine. Over the next few days, Kellen found excuses to visit Clifton every day. He told himself he was just checking on Josephine, making sure she was safe and settling in. But the truth was he could not stay away. Every moment he was not with her felt wasted, and every moment he was with her felt like coming home. They took walks together through the town and out into the surrounding desert. Kellen taught her about the plants and animals, pointed out the different rock formations, and told her the stories his grandfather had told him about the land. Josephine talked about books and ideas, about philosophy and poetry, and Kellen found himself fascinated by the workings of her mind, even though he had never been much of a scholar himself. True to her word, Mrs. Patterson spoke to the town council, and within 3 days, Josephine had been offered the position of schoolteacher to start when the next term began in 3 weeks. The salary was modest, but it included a small cottage near the school and enough to live on independently. "I cannot believe this is happening," Josephine told Kellen as they sat together on the porch of the boarding house one evening. "A week ago, I was on a train heading toward what I thought was my only option, and now I have a job, a place to live, and a future I actually chose for myself." "You deserve all of it," Kellen said. "You deserve so much more." She turned to look at him, the setting sun painting her face in shades of gold and rose. "Kellen, I need to ask you something. Anything. Why have you not spoken of your intentions? You said on that first day that you felt something when you saw me. I confess that I felt it too, but you have been nothing but a perfect gentleman. You have not pressed me, have not asked me for anything." "Why?" Kellen took a deep breath. "Because you just escaped one situation where a man was trying to pressure you and control you. I did not want to be another man making demands. I wanted you to have time to find your footing, to make your own choices without feeling obligated to me because I helped you. That is very noble of you. It is also selfish, because I am hoping that once you have had that time, once you feel secure in your own right, you might choose me anyway. Not because you need me, but because you want me." Josephine reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I do want you," she said softly. "I think I have wanted you since that first moment on the train platform, but you are right that I needed this time. I needed to know that I could stand on my own, that I was not just trading one form of dependence for another. And now I think I would very much like to see where this feeling between us might lead, if you are willing to be patient with me." "I would wait forever for you, Josephine." She smiled, that beautiful smile that made his heart race. "I do not think it will take quite that long." They sat there as the sun set, hands clasped, and Kellen felt a peace settle over him that he had never known before. This was right. She was right. Everything was falling into place. But in a town like Clifton, peace never lasted long. The trouble started 3 days later. Kellen was in the mercantile buying supplies for the ranch when he overheard 2 miners talking in low voices near the back of the store. "I heard Marcus is spreading stories about that new schoolteacher," one of them said. "Says she is not as respectable as she pretends. Says she led him on and then threw him over for a richer man." "That's so. She seemed like a nice lady when I met her." "Well, Marcus is making her sound like something else entirely. Says a woman like that should not be teaching children." Kellen's hands clenched around the bag of flour he was holding. He paid quickly and left the mercantile, his mind racing. He rode straight to his father. Kenneth listened to the story with a grim expression. "Marcus is trying to ruin her reputation," he said. "If he succeeds, the town council might reconsider hiring her. We cannot let that happen." "No, we cannot. But how do you fight gossip, son? Words spread like wildfire and they are impossible to take back. Then we need to speak louder. We need people who will vouch for Josephine's character. Mrs. Patterson will speak for her, certainly. And our family carries some weight in this town, but it may not be enough. Kellen thought hard. Then an idea came to him. What if I married her? If Josephine was a married woman, a respectable rancher's wife, Marcus's rumors would have no teeth. Kenneth raised his eyebrows. That is certainly one solution, but it is also asking that young woman to marry you for the wrong reasons, out of necessity rather than love. She already cares for me. She said so. Cares for you and is ready to marry you are two very different things, son. Do not rush this. There may be another way. But Kellen could not think of one. And the next day, when he went into town and saw the way some of the townspeople looked at Josephine, the whispers that followed her when she walked down the street, he knew they were running out of time. He found her in the small cottage that would be hers when the school term started. She was trying to clean years of accumulated dust and neglect, a kerchief tied over her hair and smudges on her face. You should not be alone here, Kellen said from the doorway. Not with the way people are talking. Josephine turned and he saw that she had been crying. You have heard the rumors then? Yes, they are lies, Josephine. Everyone who knows you knows they are lies. But most people do not know me. They only know what Marcus is telling them. She sank down onto a dusty chair. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should leave Clifton, try somewhere else. No. Kellen crossed to her and knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands. You are not running away. You have done nothing wrong, and you are not going to let Marcus Hendricks drive you out of town. Then what do I do? How do I fight this? Kellen took a deep breath. This was not how he had wanted to do this. He had imagined a romantic proposal, something worthy of the depth of his feelings. But sometimes life did not give you perfect moments. Marry me, he said. Josephine stared at him. What? Marry me? If you are my wife, if you have the protection of my name and my family, Marcus cannot touch you. His rumors will mean nothing. Kellen, you cannot be serious. We have known each other for less than 2 weeks. I am completely serious. I love you, Josephine. I have loved you since the moment I saw you. I know it sounds impossible, but it is the truth. And I think you have feelings for me too. I do, but marriage, that is such a permanent step. I know. And if you need more time, I will give it to you. We can figure out some other way to fight Marcus. But I am asking you to marry me not just because of him, but because I want to. Because I want you to be my wife, to share my life, to build a future together. The timing is not ideal, but my feelings are real. Josephine was crying in earnest now, tears streaming down her face. I do not want to marry you just to save my reputation. That is not fair to you. You would not be. You would be marrying me because we love each other. The fact that it also solves a practical problem is just a bonus. She laughed through her tears, a wet, choked sound. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. I love you, you love me. Everything else is just details. I do love you, she whispered. I know it is far too soon and it makes no logical sense, but I do. You are the kindest, most decent man I have ever met. You make me feel safe and valued and seen in a way no one else ever has. Then marry me. Not next month or next year, now, today. We can go to the minister right now. Today. Why wait? Give me one good reason to wait and I will, but if you cannot, then let us do this. Let us start our lives together right now. Josephine searched his face and Kellen held his breath. Then, slowly, she smiled. I cannot think of a single good reason to wait. Is that a yes? Yes, Kellen Garrett, I will marry you. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it was everything he had imagined and more. She tasted like salt from her tears and something sweet, and she melted against him with a soft sigh that made his blood sing. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. We should go, Kellen said, before you change your mind. I will not change my mind, Josephine assured him, but she let him pull her to her feet and out the door. They went first to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, so Josephine could change into something nicer and collect her few belongings. Mrs. Patterson took one look at their joined hands and their flushed faces and clasped her hands together with delight. "You are getting married," she exclaimed. "Right now," Kellen said. "Will you stand as witness?" "I would be honored." They collected Mrs. Patterson and walked to the small church at the end of the main street. The minister, Reverend Thompson, was a kindly man in his 60s who had known Kellen since he was a boy. He listened to their request with raised eyebrows but no judgment. "This is rather sudden," he observed. "Yes, sir," Kellen agreed, "but we are certain." Reverend Thompson looked at Josephine. "You are the young woman who was meant to marry Marcus Hendricks, are you not?" "I was," Josephine said steadily, "but I discovered we would not suit. My feelings for Kellen are entirely separate from that." "And you are sure you want this? You have only been in Clifton for less than 2 weeks." "I am sure, Reverend. Kellen is a good man. I love him and I want to be his wife." The Reverend studied them both for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Very well. I have always believed that when the Lord brings 2 people together, there is no point in dragging out the formalities. Let us have a wedding." It was a simple ceremony, just the 4 of them in the quiet church. Kellen had no ring to offer, but he promised to get one as soon as he could. Josephine said she did not care about a ring. She cared about the vows they spoke to each other, the promises to love and honor and cherish. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them man and wife, Kellen kissed Josephine again, and this time it was even sweeter because she was his. Truly, legally, his. Mrs. Patterson wept happily and hugged them both. "You must come back to the boarding house for a celebration dinner," she insisted. I will not take no for an answer, but Kellen had other plans. "Actually, Mrs. Patterson, I was hoping to take my wife home to the ranch. My father will want to meet her properly." "Your wife," Josephine repeated, wonder in her voice. "That will take some getting used to." They rode out to the K-Bar-G together, Josephine sitting in front of Kellen on his horse, his arms around her to hold the reins. The afternoon sun was warm, and the desert was alive with color. Josephine leaned back against his chest, and Kellen thought he had never been happier in his entire life. Kenneth was waiting on the porch when they arrived. He took one look at them and started to laugh. "You actually did it," he said. "You married her." "Today," Kellen said, dismounting and then helping Josephine down. "Father, this is my wife, Josephine Garrett. Josephine, my father, Kenneth." Kenneth stepped forward and took Josephine's hand, bowing over it with old-fashioned courtesy. "Welcome to the family, my dear. I apologize for my son's impetuousness, but I am delighted to have you as a daughter-in-law." "Thank you, Mr. Garrett," Josephine said, a bit shyly. "I know this must seem very sudden. When a Garrett man makes up his mind, there is no stopping him. My wife was the same way. I imagine you will fit right in." He looked at Kellen. "I assume you will be moving into the house, if that is acceptable, just until we can build our own place." "This house has plenty of room, and I look forward to the company." Kenneth smiled at Josephine. "Come inside. Let me show you around your new home." The ranch house was spacious and comfortable, built for a large family. Kenneth showed Josephine through the rooms, pointing out which had been Kellen's mother's favorite sitting room, which bedroom would be theirs, where the kitchen was and the washroom and the parlor. Josephine looked around with wide eyes, taking it all in. "It is wonderful," she said softly. "I never imagined I would have a home like this." "It is yours now," Kenneth said, "yours and Kellen's, and someday, if the Lord wills it, your children's." That evening they had a simple dinner together, the 3 of them. Kenneth told stories about Kellen as a boy, and Josephine laughed until she cried at the tale of Kellen trying to rope a jackrabbit and getting tangled in his own lasso. Kellen protested that he had only been 7 years old, which just made Josephine laugh harder. After dinner, Kenneth diplomatically excused himself to his own room, leaving Kellen and Josephine alone. They stood together in the bedroom that was now theirs, suddenly shy with each other. "I cannot believe we are married," Josephine said, touching the ring finger of her left hand as though expecting to find a band there. "This morning I woke up alone and now I have a husband. Are you sorry?" Kellen asked, suddenly worried. "No, not even a little bit. Are you?" Not for a single second. He crossed to her and took her face in his hands, kissing her gently. She responded with a soft sigh, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. The kiss deepened, and Kellen felt desire ignite in his blood, but he forced himself to pull back. "We do not have to do anything tonight," he said, his voice rough. "I know this is all very sudden. We can take our time." Josephine smiled up at him, and there was something in her eyes that made his heart race. "I do not want to take our time. I want to be your wife in every way." "Unless you would rather wait." "No," Kellen said fervently. "I definitely do not want to wait." She laughed and pulled him down for another kiss, and this time he did not hold back. They came together with tenderness and passion, learning each other in the lamplight, and when Josephine fell asleep in his arms hours later, Kellen lay awake just watching her. His wife, the woman he loved, the woman who had walked into his life less than 2 weeks ago and changed everything. He had never believed in fate or destiny before. But looking at Josephine, her dark hair spread across his pillow and her face peaceful in sleep, he could not deny that some force larger than himself had brought them together. She was meant to be his, and he was meant to be hers. The next morning, the news of their marriage spread through Clifton like wildfire. The reaction was mixed. Some people were delighted, seeing it as a romantic story. Others, particularly those who had been friendly with Marcus Hendricks, were scandalized by the speed of the courtship and marriage. But Kellen did not care what anyone thought. Josephine was his wife, and that was all that mattered. They went into town together 2 days after the wedding to file the marriage certificate and to shop for a few things Josephine needed. As they walked down the main street, arm in arm, Kellen saw Marcus standing outside the mercantile, watching them with eyes full of venom. "Ignore him," Kellen murmured to Josephine, but Marcus stepped into their path. "Well, well, the happy couple." "Hendricks," Kellen said curtly, "excuse us. I just wanted to offer my congratulations. You certainly did not waste any time, did you, Mrs. Garrett? Not even 2 weeks in town and you are already married. Makes a man wonder what your hurry was." "My hurry was marrying the man I love," Josephine said coolly. "Something you would know nothing about." Marcus's face reddened. "You little witch. You and your cowboy deserve each other, but do not think this is over. I will not forget what you did." "What I did?" Josephine's voice rose. "I refused to marry a bully and a blackguard." "If you consider that an offense, that says everything anyone needs to know about your character." People were stopping to watch now, gathering on the boardwalk. Kellen saw the sheriff standing outside his office, observing the confrontation with interest. "You took my money and my time," Marcus hissed. "You owe me. I offered to repay you for the train ticket. The offer still stands, but that is all you are owed. Not my time, not my obedience, and certainly not my hand in marriage. You were supposed to be mine. I am no one's but my own. And I choose to share my life with Kellen. Now get out of our way." For a moment, Kellen thought Marcus might actually try to grab Josephine. He shifted his weight, ready to intervene. But the sheriff was moving closer now, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Is there a problem here?" the sheriff asked. Marcus looked at the sheriff, then at Kellen, then at Josephine. Whatever he saw in their faces made him step back. "No problem," he said tersely. "I was just leaving." He turned and stalked back into the mercantile. The small crowd that had gathered began to disperse, several people nodding approvingly at Josephine, The sheriff tipped his hat. "Mrs. Garrett, Mr. Garrett, you folks have a good day now." "Thank you, Sheriff," Kellen said. They continued with their errands, but Kellen noticed that Josephine was shaking slightly. He took her hand and squeezed it. "You were magnificent," he told her. "I was terrified," she admitted. "But I meant every word. I am tired of men like him thinking they can control women." "Well, you certainly put him in his place. You think he will cause more trouble, probably, but we will deal with it together." Over the next few weeks, Josephine settled into her new life. She spent her days preparing for the upcoming school term, organizing the one-room schoolhouse and planning lessons. Kellen helped her in the evenings, building new desks and repairing the roof where it leaked. Kenneth often joined them, and Josephine quickly grew comfortable with her father-in-law, appreciating his dry humor and his obvious love for his son. Marcus continued to spread rumors, but they lost their power now that Josephine was a married woman and the wife of a respected rancher. The town council affirmed their decision to hire her as the schoolteacher, and when the term started, she had 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. Kellen loved watching her teach. He would sometimes ride into town in the afternoon and arrive just as school was letting out. He would see Josephine standing in the doorway of the schoolhouse, smiling at her students as they ran out into the sunshine, and his heart would swell with pride and love. She was a natural teacher, patient and kind but firm when she needed to be. The children adored her, and their parents quickly came to respect her. Even those who had been skeptical at first had to admit that Clifton was lucky to have such an educated and dedicated teacher. In the evenings, Kellen and Josephine would return to the ranch, and they would have dinner with Kenneth. Then they would retire to their room, and Kellen would hold his wife in his arms and marvel at how his life had changed. "I love you," he told her one night as they lay together in the darkness. "I love you too," Josephine murmured, her head on his chest. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real, that I found you, that we found each other." "You were meant for me," Kellen said. "Even when you thought you were coming here for someone else, you were really coming here for me. I believe that." "So do I," Josephine said softly. 2 months after their wedding, Josephine came to Kellen with news that made his heart leap. She was expecting their first child. "Are you certain?" he asked, joy flooding through him. "As certain as I can be. I have missed my courses twice now, and I have been feeling ill in the mornings. Mrs. Patterson said those are sure signs." Kellen swept her into his arms and spun her around, making her laugh. "We are going to be parents." "Put me down, you madman. You will make me dizzy." He set her down but kept his arms around her. "I am going to be a father. You are going to be a mother. We are going to have a baby." "I am a little frightened," Josephine admitted. "I do not know anything about being a mother." "You will be wonderful. You are wonderful at everything you do." Kenneth was equally delighted when they told him. "A grandchild. Your mother would have been over the moon." His eyes grew misty. "I wish she could have met Josephine, could have known about the baby." "She would have loved Josephine," Kellen said. "She would have adored her, just as I do." As Josephine's pregnancy progressed, she continued to teach until she was too far along to comfortably stand for hours at a time. The town hired a temporary replacement, and Josephine spent her days at the ranch, sewing baby clothes and preparing the small nursery in the room next to theirs. Kellen was more protective than ever, worrying about her constantly. Josephine bore his fussing with good humor, teasing him gently when he insisted she should not lift anything heavier than a teacup. "Women have been having babies since the dawn of time, Kellen. I am not made of glass. You are precious to me. I am allowed to worry." She would smile and kiss him and let him fuss, because she knew it came from love. The baby came on a warm spring evening, 7 months after Kellen and Josephine had married. Kellen paced outside the bedroom door while Mrs. Patterson and the town's midwife attended to Josephine. Every time he heard her cry out, he wanted to break down the door and go to her, but Mrs. Patterson had been very firm that he was not to enter until the baby was born. Kenneth sat calmly in a chair, ostensibly reading but really just watching his son wear a path in the floorboards. "Sit down, Kellen. You are going to exhaust yourself." "How can I sit? She is in pain." "She is bringing your child into the world. It is hard work, but Mrs. Patterson knows what she is doing. What if something goes wrong? Then we will deal with it. But worrying will not change anything." Kellen tried to sit, but he was back on his feet within minutes. It felt like hours passed, though it was probably less than one. And then, finally, he heard it. The thin, wavering cry of a newborn baby. The bedroom door opened and Mrs. Patterson emerged, her sleeves rolled up and a smile on her face. "You have a son, Mr. Garrett, a healthy, strong boy, and your wife is doing well." Kellen nearly collapsed with relief. "Can I see them?" "Of course. Go on in." He pushed past her into the bedroom. Josephine was propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale but glowing. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket, and when Kellen approached, she pulled the blanket back to reveal a small, red-faced infant with a surprising amount of dark hair. "Our son," she said softly. "Kellen, look, we made him." Kellen sank down onto the bed beside her, gazing at the baby in wonder. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you so much." "I love you too." Josephine looked down at their son with such tenderness that it made Kellen's throat tight. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at the tiny boy, Kellen thought of his father sitting outside, waiting patiently to meet his grandson. "What about Kenneth?" he suggested. "After my father." "We could call him Kenny for short." Josephine smiled. "Kenneth Garrett, I like that. It is a strong name." "Kenny," Kellen said, reaching out to touch his son's tiny hand. The baby's fingers curled around his thumb, and Kellen felt something shift in his chest, a fierce protective love unlike anything he had ever known. "Welcome to the world, Kenny. We have been waiting for you." Kenneth Sr. was allowed in a few minutes later, and Kellen watched as his father held his grandson for the first time, saw the tears in the older man's eyes as he looked down at the baby. "He looks like you did when you were born," Kenneth told Kellen. "Same serious expression, same dark hair. Your mother always said you came into the world looking like you were already thinking deep thoughts." "I hope he has his mother's intelligence," Kellen said, "and his father's kindness," Josephine added. Over the next few weeks, they settled into the rhythms of life with a newborn. Kenny was a relatively easy baby, sleeping for a few hours at a stretch and only fussing when he was hungry or needed changing. Kellen was a devoted father, getting up with Josephine for the night feedings and spending hours just watching his son sleep. Josephine had to give up teaching for the time being, but she did not seem to mind. "I can always go back when Kenny is older," she said. "Right now, I want to be with him." Marcus Hendricks had been noticeably quiet since Josephine and Kellen's marriage. He still ran the mercantile, but he kept to himself and did not cause any more trouble. Kellen hoped the man had finally moved on. But one afternoon, when Kenny was about 2 months old, Kellen went into town for supplies and found the mercantile closed. That was unusual. Marcus kept very regular hours. Kellen went to the saloon and found the bartender, a man named Jim who knew everyone in town. "You seen Marcus Hendricks today?" Kellen asked. "Nope, nobody has. His store has been closed for 2 days now. Some folks are getting worried." Kellen had a bad feeling. He went to the sheriff. Sheriff Tom Collins listened to Kellen's concerns and agreed to check on Marcus. They went to the mercantile together and found the door locked. When they went around to the back entrance, they found it slightly ajar. "Marcus," the sheriff called. "You in there?" No answer. They entered cautiously. The mercantile was dim and silent. In the back room they found Marcus slumped over his desk, a half-empty whiskey bottle beside him and an empty laudanum bottle in his hand. The sheriff checked for a pulse and shook his head. "He is gone. Looks like he took too much laudanum, probably mixed it with the whiskey." Kellen stared at the body. He felt no satisfaction, only a deep sadness. Did he do it on purpose, do you think? Hard to say. Could have been an accident, could have been intentional. The sheriff sighed. "I heard he has been drinking more and more since your wedding. Guess he could not let go of his anger." They arranged for the undertaker to come collect the body. The sheriff would have to investigate, but it seemed straightforward enough. Marcus Hendricks had died from an overdose of laudanum and alcohol. Kellen rode home slowly, thinking about the man who had wanted to marry Josephine, who had seen her as property rather than a person. There was a cautionary tale there about bitterness and obsession, about what happened when you could not accept that some things were not meant to be. When he told Josephine what had happened, she was quiet for a long time. "I feel sorry for him," she finally said. "He was not a good man, but he was still a person, still someone who suffered." "You have a kind heart," Kellen said, pulling her close. "I have a grateful heart. I am grateful that I did not marry him, that I found you instead. I am grateful for every day of our life together." "So am I, love." "So am I." Time passed. Kenny grew from an infant to a toddler, sturdy and bright-eyed. Josephine went back to teaching part-time, and Mrs. Patterson happily watched Kenny during the school day. Kellen and his father expanded the ranch, buying more land and cattle. The K-Bar-G prospered. When Kenny was 3 years old, Josephine announced she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter was born on a cool autumn evening with red hair like Josephine's grandmother and green eyes like her mother. They named her Catherine, after Kenneth's late wife. "Your mother would have loved that," Kellen told his father. Kenneth, now a grandfather twice over, spent hours with his grandchildren, teaching Kenny about the ranch and rocking baby Catherine to sleep. He seemed younger somehow, energized by the new life in the house. The years rolled on, full and rich. Kellen and Josephine had 2 more children, another boy named James and a girl they called Lily. The house rang with laughter and the chaos of a growing family. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kellen took Josephine back to the spot where they had stood on their first walk together, looking out at the desert and the mountains. "You remember?" he asked. "You said the openness of this land was exhilarating, that it felt like anything could happen." "I remember," Josephine said, leaning against him. "I was so scared that day, so uncertain about everything. And now I am certain, of you, of us, of the life we have built together. I love you, Kellen Garrett. I will love you until my last breath." "I knew you were mine the moment I saw you step off that train," Kellen said. "You were meant for another man, but I knew you were meant for me. And I was right." "You were right," Josephine agreed, turning in his arms to kiss him. "The best decision I ever made was saying yes to you." They stood there together as the sun set over the Arizona desert. 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a beautiful life out of a chance encounter and a moment of recognition. Their children were back at the ranch with their grandfather, probably causing all manner of mischief. Tomorrow, there would be chores and lessons and the 1,000 small tasks that made up a life. But right now, there was just this. The 2 of them, the land they loved, and a future stretching out bright and full of promise. Kellen thought back to that afternoon 10 years ago when he had been walking his horse to the blacksmith and had looked up to see a woman stepping off a train. A woman who was supposed to marry someone else. A woman who had changed his entire world. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Josephine asked. "For choosing me. For taking a chance on a cowboy you barely knew, for building this life with me." "I would choose you 1,000 times over," Josephine said. "In every lifetime, in every world, I would choose you." They walked back to the ranch hand in hand as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The house was warm and bright with lamplight when they reached it. Through the windows, they could see Kenneth playing with the children. Kenny trying to teach his younger siblings some game while Catherine bossed everyone around, and James ignored them all to focus on a toy horse. It was chaotic and loud and imperfect, and absolutely everything Kellen had ever wanted. He opened the door for his wife, and they stepped inside together, into the warmth and light and love of the home they had made. The years continued to be kind to the Garrett family. Kenneth Sr. lived to see all 4 of his grandchildren grow into fine young adults before he passed peacefully in his sleep, at the age of 78. His death was mourned throughout Clifton, where he had been respected and admired for his fairness and integrity. Kenny, their eldest, took over more and more of the ranch operations as Kellen aged, showing a natural aptitude for the work, and the same dedication his father and grandfather had demonstrated. Catherine became a teacher like her mother, eventually taking over the Clifton school when Josephine retired. James surprised everyone by showing an interest in law and going off to study in Tucson, while Lily married a young doctor who set up practice in Clifton. Kellen and Josephine watched their children build their own lives with pride and satisfaction. On quiet evenings, they would sit together on the porch of the ranch house, the same porch where Kenneth Sr. had once waited for his son to bring home his unexpected bride. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had married Marcus Hendricks?" Kellen asked one evening when they were both in their 50s. Josephine shuddered. "I try not to. It would have been a nightmare. I would have been trapped and miserable. But you might have still ended up free of him eventually, and then you could have married someone else, had a different life. A different life, but not a better one. This is the life I was meant to have, Kellen, with you, with our children, with all of this." She gestured at the ranch spread out before them, at the desert they both loved. "I do not believe in many coincidences, but I believe that train was meant to bring me to you, not to Marcus, but to you." "I believe that too," Kellen said, taking her hand. Her fingers were marked with age now, the same as his, but her grip was still strong. "Every day with you has been a gift, even the hard days, especially the hard days, because we faced them together." They had indeed faced challenges over the years. There had been droughts that threatened the ranch, illnesses that struck the children, times when money was tight and the future uncertain. But they had weathered every storm together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. Now, as they moved into the later years of their lives, they found peace in the simple rhythms of each day. Kellen no longer worked the ranch as hard as he once had, leaving most of the physical labor to Kenny and the ranch hands. Josephine had given up teaching but still tutored children in town who needed extra help. They had grandchildren now, a whole new generation of Garretts running around the ranch, and the sound of children's laughter once again filled the house. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. It seemed like half of Clifton turned out to celebrate with them. There was food and music and dancing, and Kellen pulled Josephine into his arms for a waltz the way he had at their daughter Catherine's wedding. 25 years, Josephine marveled. "How did we get so old so quickly?" "We are not old. We are seasoned," Kellen said, making her laugh. "You are still the same sweet talker who convinced me to marry him after knowing him for less than 2 weeks. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Josephine corrected. "The best decision was stopping you on that train platform and not just letting me go off with Marcus." That was not a decision. That was instinct. I could not have stopped myself if I had tried. They danced until the sun set, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, their friends and neighbors, all the people who had become part of the tapestry of their lives. Later that night, alone in their bedroom, Josephine said, "I want you to know something." "What is that?" "I am happy. Completely, utterly happy. I have been loved well, and I have loved well in return. If my life ended tomorrow, I would have no regrets." "Do not talk about ending," Kellen said, pulling her close. "We have many more years ahead of us." "I hope so. But just in case, I wanted you to know. I know, love, and I feel the same way." They were blessed with many more years. They saw all their children married and settled. They welcomed more grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The K-Bar-G Ranch continued to prosper under Kenny's management, and the Garrett name remained synonymous with integrity and hard work throughout the territory. When Arizona finally achieved statehood in 1912, Kellen and Josephine celebrated with the rest of Clifton. They had been part of the territory for so long that it was strange to think of it as a state, but they were proud to be Arizonans. Josephine passed away first, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73. Kellen woke one morning to find her still and silent beside him, a slight smile on her face, as though she had slipped away while dreaming something pleasant. He held her hand for a long time before calling for their children. His grief was immense, a yawning chasm that threatened to swallow him whole. But there was also gratitude. Gratitude for every year, every day, every moment they had shared. At her funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives she had touched. Former students, now grown with children of their own, stood to speak about how she had inspired them. Neighbors talked about her kindness and her wisdom. Kellen sat in the front pew, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, and listened to them celebrate the woman he had loved for more than 40 years. After the service, as they were preparing to lay her to rest in the small cemetery on the ranch, Kenny pulled his father aside. "Are you going to be all right?" he asked. Kellen looked at his son, this man who carried so much of both him and Josephine in his features and his manner. "I will be. It will hurt for a long time, but I will be all right. Your mother would expect me to carry on. She loved you very much." "I know. And I loved her. I loved her from the moment I saw her, and I will love her until I draw my last breath." Kellen lived for 3 more years after Josephine's death. He remained active and engaged with the ranch and his family, but everyone could see that a light had gone out in him. He spoke often of Josephine, keeping her memory alive with stories and remembrances. On a warm spring evening, exactly 44 years after the day, he first saw Josephine step off the train in Clifton. Kellen Garrett passed away in his sleep in the same bed where he had held his wife for the last time. His children found him in the morning, peaceful and still, his hand stretched out across the pillow as though reaching for someone who was no longer there. They buried him next to Josephine on the ranch he had loved, under the wide Arizona sky. The whole town turned out for his funeral, 3 generations of people whose lives had been touched by his decency and kindness. Kenny stood at his father's grave and thought about the story he had heard so many times growing up. The story of how his mother had come to Clifton to marry another man, but his father had known the moment he saw her that she was meant to be his. How he had intervened, had courted her, had convinced her to take a chance on him. It was a love story for the ages, the kind of romance that people told their children and grandchildren about. And it had all started with a train pulling into a dusty Arizona town and a cowboy who trusted his instincts. Kenny looked at the 2 headstones, side by side. Josephine Zimmerman Garrett and Kellen Garrett, beloved wife and mother, beloved husband and father, together forever, And Kenny knew that wherever they were now, they were together, just as they had always been meant to be. The K-Bar-G ranch continued on, passed down through the generations. The story of Kellen and Josephine became part of family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. New generations of Garretts grew up hearing about their great-grandparents who had found each other against all odds and built a life based on love and mutual respect. The small cottage where Josephine had first lived, when she was supposed to be the schoolteacher, became a kind of shrine, preserved and maintained by the family. The church where they had married in such haste still stood, and couples who knew the story sometimes asked to be married there, hoping some of Kellen and Josephine's magic would bless their own unions. Clifton itself changed over the years. The mines eventually played out, and the town shrank and evolved. But the Garrett name remained, and the ranch remained, a testament to what two people could build when they had love and determination and faith in each other. And sometimes, on warm evenings when the desert wind blew just right, old-timers in Clifton would swear they could see two figures walking hand in hand out past the ranch house, looking at the sunset over the mountains. A tall cowboy and a slender woman, together as they had always been, as they would always be. It was just a story, of course. Just the romantic imaginings of people who wanted to believe in eternal love. But then again, maybe it was not just a story. Maybe love like Kellen and Josephine's really did transcend death, really did echo through the years, inspiring and encouraging all those who came after. Either way, the story endured. The mail-order bride who was meant for one man but found another. The cowboy who trusted his heart and was rewarded with a lifetime of love. The family they built together, the legacy they left behind. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth believing in, and in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the particulars of how they met or how quickly they married, but the simple truth at the heart of it all. They had loved each other, completely and truly, for all of their days, and that love had made all the difference.